The world woke up to the unthinkable. Whoopi Goldberg, the beloved comedian, actress, and TV host, had been rushed to the hospital after a shocking announcement took the media by storm. The news spread like wildfire. Elon Musk, the tech mogul, known for his bold moves and even bolder personality, had filed a $700 million lawsuit against Whoopi. It wasn't just any lawsuit. The media frenzy erupted over a single comment made months ago during an episode of The View. What started as a light-hearted joke, a typical Whoopi quip, had turned into a legal nightmare. Musk, known for not shying away from controversy, had taken offense to Whoopi's words. What was intended as a humorous take on his recent ventures suddenly became an accusation that threatened to ruin Whoopi's career. Her fans were stunned, her colleagues were speechless, and the whole world seemed to be waiting for her next move. As cameras flashed and reporters screamed questions outside her New York apartment, Whoopi remained out of sight, but those close to her knew that something was deeply wrong. A few hours later, the news broke. Whoopi had been rushed to the hospital. The details were scarce, but her representatives confirmed that she had been dealing with severe stress related to the lawsuit. The media immediately started speculating. Was this just the beginning of a much bigger storm? Or would she be able to rise above it as she always had? In the chaotic aftermath of the announcement, Whoopi's family, friends, and legal team rallied around her, but the emotional toll was undeniable. She had always been strong, always quick with a laugh, but this time it felt different. This time, it felt like everything she had worked for was being taken away in an instant. What had started as a simple remark in a late-night talk show now hung over Whoopi like a dark cloud. The story of her hospitalization was splashed across every tabloid, every social media feed. The $700 million lawsuit? That was just the beginning. As the media storm raged on, a single question lingered. How did Whoopi get here? Would this just be another chapter in her extraordinary career, or would it be the one that changed everything? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The lawsuit came as a complete shock to Whoopi. She had always been fearless with her words, but she never imagined that one offhand comment would spiral into such a massive legal battle. Elon Musk, one of the most powerful men in the world, had filed a defamation suit against her, demanding a staggering $700 million in damages. It all started months ago on The View, where Whoopi had made a remark about Musk's ambitious plans to send humans to Mars. She had joked about how people would need to bring their sense of humor with them if they were going to survive life on another planet. The comment was light-hearted. Typical Whoopi humor, aimed at poking fun at the idea of space travel. But Musk, always a target for public criticism, didn't take kindly to it. He had already been dealing with his own set of controversies, from his outbursts on Twitter to his public battles with the media. Whoopi's comment, to him, crossed a line. It wasn't long before Musk's legal team was on the offensive. The lawsuit claimed that Whoopi's words were disparaging and malicious, accusing her of defaming Musk's character and tarnishing his reputation. Musk, who had built his empire on bold, brash moves, wasn't backing down. For Whoopi, the timing couldn't have been worse. She had always been outspoken, never afraid to speak her mind. But now it felt as though her very career was at stake. The media's portrayal of her was shifting rapidly, from beloved talk show host to a woman embroiled in a high-profile legal battle with one of the richest men on the planet. Her once stellar public image was in jeopardy, and no amount of charm or humor could undo the damage that had already been done. Her lawyer, the sharp and seasoned Ava Montgomery, was doing everything she could to keep the situation under control. "We're going to fight this," Ava had told Whoopi in their first meeting after the lawsuit was filed. "We'll argue that your comment was just a joke, protected under the First Amendment." But deep down, Whoopi was scared. Not of the legal battle itself, she had fought her fair share of difficult battles over the years, but of what this lawsuit represented. Musk wasn't just any billionaire. He was the kind of person who could destroy careers with a single tweet, a single press release. She didn't know if she could stand up against that kind of power. The stress of the lawsuit began to take its toll. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't focus. Every time her phone buzzed, it was another headline, another notification that pushed her deeper into a spiral of anxiety. Her health began to decline, and soon enough she found herself in the hospital. As the public awaited updates on Whoopi's condition, the lawsuit continued to escalate. The media was relentless, publishing every new piece of information, whether it was relevant or not. Whoopi was no longer just a celebrity. She was a spectacle, something to be torn apart for the world's entertainment. Her close friends, like Joy Behar and Sunny Hostin from The View, tried to offer comfort. They stood by her, supporting her through the long days and sleepless nights. But even their words of encouragement couldn't fully lift the weight of the situation. Behind the scenes, Whoopi's legal team was working overtime. Ava Montgomery had already filed for a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, arguing that Musk's claims were baseless and that the $700 million demand was nothing more than a tactic to silence her. But the fight was far from over. The lawsuit was gaining steam and the world was watching. As Whoopi sat in her hospital room, she knew she had two choices. She could either fold under the pressure or stand her ground. And despite the fear gnawing at her, she had always chosen to stand tall in the face of adversity. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Whoopi recovered in the hospital, her mind remained miles away from her physical condition. The weight of the lawsuit pressed on her chest like a 1,000-pound boulder. She had always been strong, resilient, able to handle the toughest situations, with a laugh or a wisecrack. But this time it felt different. This time her whole career, her legacy was on the line. The strain began to show in her relationships too. Whoopi had always been the glue that held her circle together, her friends, her colleagues, and her fans. But now, with the lawsuit hanging over her, everything seemed to be unraveling. Even those closest to her couldn't fully grasp the toll it was taking. Joy Behar, Whoopi's longtime friend and co-host on The View, visited her in the hospital. The tension in the room was palpable as Joy tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes in the way only she could. But Whoopi wasn't in the mood for humor. "Whoopi," Joy said gently, sitting beside her bed, "you're going to get through this. This is just another one of those crazy moments in your life. You'll rise above it. You always do." Whoopi smiled, faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Joy couldn't ignore. "I don't know, Joy," Whoopi whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm not sure I can do this. Elon Musk is playing a game I'm not equipped to fight. He has so much power, so much influence. I've always been able to joke my way out of things, but this is different." Joy took Whoopi's hand in hers, squeezing it tight. "You've been through worse, remember. You've survived cancer, personal heartbreak, public scrutiny. You fought battles for decades. This is no different." But the words felt hollow to Whoopi. Sure, she had faced challenges before, many of them, in fact, but this felt like something else entirely. This wasn't just about standing up for herself. It was about surviving a battle against one of the wealthiest and most influential figures in the world. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The legal team, led by Ava Montgomery, continued to push forward, but even they seemed to be feeling the pressure. Their meetings became more frequent, more tense. Ava was no longer the calm, reassuring presence Whoopi had come to rely on. Now she was just another person grappling with the overwhelming complexity of the case. "We're up against a giant," Ava said one afternoon, her voice clipped. "Musk's lawyers are relentless. They've already filed motions to prevent us from even discussing your First Amendment rights. They're playing dirty, and we need to prepare for a long fight." Whoopi nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of her depth. She had always prided herself on being able to handle whatever life threw at her, but this time the battle felt unwinnable. With each passing day, the pressure mounted. It wasn't just the lawsuit that weighed on her. Her health was deteriorating too. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and her anxiety seemed to grow with every news cycle. The media painted a picture of Whoopi as a woman in free fall, a beloved TV personality brought low by her own careless words. The headlines were relentless. Whoopi's words come back to haunt her, and Elon Musk files defamation suit against Whoopi Goldberg. Every day it felt like the world was watching her struggle, waiting for her to crack. But what hurt the most was the distance it had put between her and her colleagues. The tension in the studio was unmistakable. Whoopi's absence was felt deeply, but even when she returned to the View to address the lawsuit, her usual warmth and confidence seemed to have been replaced by a cautious, weary demeanor. Sunny Hostin, another close friend and co-host, gently prodded Whoopi one day after a taping. "Are you sure you're okay, Whoopi? You've been distant lately." Whoopi forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Sunny, just tired. There's a lot going on, you know, a lot to figure out." But Sunny, who had always been perceptive, could tell that something was wrong. "You're not fine. You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders and it's eating you alive. We're here for you, always. You don't have to go through this alone." Whoopi nodded slowly, appreciating her friend's concern, but part of her couldn't help feeling that no one could truly understand the weight of this battle. No one knew what it was like to face a billionaire with endless resources, someone who had the power to bury her in legal paperwork, smear campaigns, and public ridicule. Whoopi felt a deep, gnawing isolation. She had always been the one to offer advice to lift others up, but now she was the one in need of support. The support was there. Her friends and colleagues were still by her side, but it wasn't enough to shake the feeling that her entire world was shifting beneath her feet. As the lawsuit loomed over her, Whoopi began to wonder if her career, her sense of identity, would survive. Would she emerge from this stronger, or would the weight of it all be too much to carry? As the days turned into weeks, Whoopi's hospital stay stretched longer than anyone had anticipated. The stress of the lawsuit, combined with the media frenzy surrounding her situation, seemed to drain the life out of her. No matter how hard her friends tried to comfort her, no one could remove the dark cloud hanging over her head. It wasn't just the legal fight, it was the pressure to keep up appearances, to remain Whoopi Goldberg, the confident, unstoppable force everyone had come to admire. The public expected her to bounce back, as she always had. But inside, Whoopi was unraveling. Her legal team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, but the weight of Musk's relentless attack was beginning to take its toll on them as well. Ava Montgomery, her attorney, had become increasingly tense during their meetings. At first, she had been hopeful that they could squash the lawsuit, that Musk's claims were absurd and would be dismissed quickly. But as the case continued to progress, it was clear that this fight was going to be much more complicated than anyone had imagined. Musk's team was using every legal loophole at their disposal, filing motions that delayed the process and kept Whoopi's team on their toes. The lawsuit was dragging on, and it wasn't just about money anymore. It had become about power, about making an example of Whoopi for daring to speak her mind. "Whoopi," Ava said one afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting with Musk's legal team, "we need to prepare for this to go to trial. They're not backing down, and neither are we. This is going to get ugly." Whoopi looked out the window, her thoughts miles away. "I never thought it would come to this. I thought I was just making a joke. I didn't think it would be the end of everything I've built." Ava sighed, sitting down across from her. "You didn't do anything wrong. You made a joke. But here's bigger than you now. It's about something much more dangerous, how powerful people can use the legal system to silence others. And we can't let that happen." But even as Ava spoke those words of reassurance, Whoopi couldn't help but wonder if she was already too deep into this fight. What if it wasn't just her career at stake? What if, by standing up to Musk, she was inviting even more destruction? The media, of course, didn't help. They fed the fire at every turn. Headlines continued to circulate, some more cruel than others. "Whoopi's defamation case, is she finally done?" "Elon Musk, the billionaire who may have taken down Whoopi Goldberg." The narrative was shifting from innocent mistake to reckless celebrity facing the consequences of her words. What hurt the most was the way some of her closest colleagues were now caught in the crossfire. The producers of The View were beginning to feel the heat from their parent network. Sponsors were growing nervous about the fallout, and behind the scenes, there were murmurs that Whoopi might need to step down temporarily, maybe even permanently. Her decision to stay quiet in the face of such backlash was creating even more uncertainty. She hadn't made a public statement since her hospitalization, leaving the media to speculate on every aspect of her health and her thoughts on the lawsuit. Finally, after weeks of silence, Whoopi agreed to a sit-down interview with a trusted journalist, David Westbrook. David had known Whoopi for years, and she knew that he would give her the space to speak her truth without sensationalizing the story. In the interview, Whoopi was more candid than she'd been in a long time. "I've always been someone who spoke my mind. And sure, I've said things that weren't always what people wanted to hear, but I never thought it would come to this," she said, her voice steady but weary. What happened wasn't just a joke. That went wrong. It's a larger issue. A battle between freedom of speech and people who can wield money and power to shut others down. And that's what I'm fighting against now. David nodded, taking in her words. "But do you feel like this is still about you? Or is this about something bigger?" Whoopi's eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of defiance there. "It's about both. Yes, it's about me. But it's also about what happens when people with power try to crush voices they don't like. I can't let that happen, and I won't." As the interview aired, the response was mixed. Some applauded her bravery for speaking out, while others criticized her for dragging the entire thing out instead of settling quickly. But for Whoopi, it wasn't about public opinion anymore. It was about standing firm, no matter what. She had always believed that laughter was the best medicine, but right now she didn't have the luxury of humor. She had to face her demons head-on, and whether or not the public was ready to hear her side, she was going to fight until the very end. Behind closed doors, her legal team continued to strategize. They were preparing for the long haul, building a case that could go to court. But it wasn't just the lawsuit that was wearing her down. It was the constant media attention, the invasive questions, the endless speculation. The world wanted a show, and Whoopi was starting to feel like the star of a reality show she never signed up for. The night was quiet, but for Whoopi, it felt as if the world was growing louder with every passing hour. The pressure from the lawsuit was wearing on her like an unrelenting tide, and despite all the support from her friends, her colleagues, and her legal team, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was slipping through her fingers. The weight of her choices, the media storm, the constant legal back and forth, it was all too much to bear. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day filled with meetings and strategy sessions, Whoopi found herself in her apartment, staring out the window at the twinkling lights of New York City. She had always loved the view from her apartment, how the city seemed to stretch on forever, a constant reminder that the world was big and full of possibilities. But tonight, it felt suffocating. She hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. Her mind raced with thoughts of the lawsuit, of Musk's relentless pursuit, of how this all started with one simple joke. What had once seemed so innocuous now felt like a betrayal. What had she said that was so wrong? Why was she being torn apart for a single comment, one that wasn't meant to harm anyone? Her phone buzzed. Another update from her legal team. Another motion from Musk's side. Another request for a meeting. She tossed the phone aside, feeling overwhelmed. That's when she received a call. It was from Joy. "Whoopi, I'm coming over. I know you're probably exhausted, but I need you to hear me out," Joy said, her voice firm but caring. Whoopi hesitated for a moment before responding. "I'm not sure what I can do right now, Joy. Everything feels like it's spiraling, and I can't keep up." Joy's response was simple but powerful. "Sometimes we need someone to remind us who we are. You've got this, Whoopi, but you've got to stop letting them take your power. Let me in. Let me help you find that fire again." And so Joy came over. She didn't come with solutions or grand gestures, but with something much more important, her presence. They sat together, talked about everything and nothing, just like they always had. They reminisced about their days on The View, laughed about old backstage stories, and took comfort in the familiarity of each other's voices. "Whoopi," Joy said after a long pause, "you're not a victim in this story. You've been the voice of truth for so many people for so long. And if you let this lawsuit define you, if you let them make you feel small, then they've won. And we both know you're too strong for that." Whoopi's eyes welled up with tears, the weight of everything crashing down on her all at once. But as she wiped them away, something inside her shifted. Maybe it wasn't about fighting the system in the way everyone expected. Maybe it was about finding her own strength again, the strength that had always been her shield, her armor against whatever came her way. The next day, Whoopi made a decision. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to let the fear of the lawsuit dictate her life. She was going to face it head-on, but in her own way. Her first step. A press conference. She hadn't spoken publicly about the lawsuit since her initial hospitalization. It had been months of silence, but she knew that now was the time to take control of the narrative. She needed to remind the world of who she was and what she stood for. The EW press conference was held in a small private room, far from the prying eyes of the tabloids. The reporters gathered, their cameras clicking in anticipation as Whoopi stepped up to the podium. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't scared. She was ready. "Good afternoon," Whoopi began, her voice steady but strong. "I know you all have a lot of questions and I'm here to answer them. But before we get into the details of the lawsuit, I want to say one thing. I've spent my career standing up for what I believe in, and I will not let a baseless legal attack take away my voice or my truth." The room went silent as everyone hung on her every word. Whoopi continued, "Yes, I made a joke that in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have made, but I will not apologize for speaking my mind, and I will not let anyone, no matter how powerful they are, shut me up. This lawsuit is not just about me, it's about something much bigger. It's about freedom of speech, about standing up for the truth and about holding those in power accountable, and I will not back down from that." The room erupted in questions, but Whoopi wasn't rattled. She answered each one with clarity, with conviction. She didn't avoid the tough questions, she faced them head-on. For the first time in months, she felt like she was in control again. She was telling her side of the story, and no one, no matter how powerful, could take that from her. When the press conference ended, there was a renewed sense of energy in Whoopi. She had found her voice again. The lawsuit was still a long, difficult battle, but now she wasn't fighting it as a victim. She was fighting it as someone who knew the value of standing her ground, even in the face of immense pressure. The road ahead would still be rocky, but Whoopi had come to a realization. No matter what happened with the lawsuit, no matter how hard the fight got, she wasn't going to lose herself. Whoopi's press conference marked a new chapter in the saga of her lawsuit. The world had taken notice. While some media outlets praised her for her courage and honesty, others criticized her for refusing to settle. But Whoopi wasn't concerned about the noise anymore. She had made her statement, and she was ready for the long fight ahead. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles, media interviews, and endless preparation. Her legal team, headed by Ava Montgomery, worked around the clock to prepare for the trial. Musk's legal team was formidable, and they were playing a calculated game, pushing to make the case as public and as painful as possible. Every detail of Whoopi's life, her past statements, her personal history, everything was being dredged up for public consumption. "Whoopi, we need to be prepared," Ava warned one morning as they sat around a conference table, papers and laptops scattered before them. "Musk's team is going to dig into your past, looking for any possible misstep. We need to anticipate what they might throw at you." Whoopi nodded, her mind already spinning with the weight of the strategy. "I've been through the ringer before. I know the drill, but this feels different." Ava leaned forward, her voice steady but concerned. "It's because it is different. This isn't just a lawsuit over a joke. It's about power, Whoopi. Musk wants to crush you, not just for the joke, but for what you represent. You're a symbol of free speech, of standing up to the powerful, and that terrifies him." Whoopi swallowed hard. Ava's words were hitting too close to home. This wasn't just about her reputation. It was about something bigger. But who would stand with her? Who would stand up to a billionaire like Elon Musk, a man with infinite resources at his disposal? Her phone rang, snapping her back to reality. It was Joy. "Hey, I just wanted to check in," Joy said, her tone warm and familiar. "How are you holding up?" Whoopi sighed. "It's a lot, Joy. I can't pretend it isn't. But I'm not backing down. I can't. Not after everything that's happened." "Good," Joy said, her voice soft but firm. "You're doing the right thing, and I'll be here every step of the way, but remember, you don't have to do this alone." I know, Whoopi replied, feeling the weight of her friend's support. I've got my team. I've got all of you. But this fight, it's exhausting, and I feel like the walls are closing in. That's the pressure talking. You're stronger than that, Whoopi. We've been through so much together. You've always come out on top. This time will be no different. Whoopi took a deep breath, absorbing the comfort in Joy's words. I'm ready, Joy. I'm not backing down. The next few days were filled with tense meetings, preparation for the trial, and constant media scrutiny. The world seemed to be watching her every move. And as much as Whoopi tried to ignore it, the reality was that the entire case had become a media circus. Headlines like, "Whoopi Goldberg's fight against Elon Musk intensifies," and "Will Whoopi survive the lawsuit of the century?" only fueled the public's fascination with the case. The public, it seemed, was divided. Some saw her as a champion for free speech, while others believed she had gone too far. In the midst of the storm, Whoopi had a conversation with her legal team that shifted everything. "We need to reframe the narrative," Ava said one afternoon. "The public is getting tired of the back and forth. They want answers and they want closure. We need to show them what this lawsuit is really about, how it's a battle for all of us, not just you." Whoopi thought about this for a moment. "So, what's our move?" Ava leaned in, her voice determined. "We start framing this as a fight for every person who's ever been silenced or threatened by the powerful. We need to make this about more than just you. We need to show that if Musk wins, it won't just be your voice silenced. It'll be the voice of anyone who dares to speak out." Whoopi felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. "I get it," she said slowly, her voice firm. "This isn't just my fight. It's everyone's, and I'm not going to back down." Ava gave a small smile. "Exactly. And when we go to court, we make sure they understand that." That night, Whoopi went to bed with a renewed sense of purpose. The next day, she would take another step in this long and complicated journey. The trial would soon be underway, and though she knew it was going to be difficult, she was ready. Her fight had become bigger than herself. It had become a symbol of resistance against those who tried to silence others, to use their power to intimidate and control. She wasn't going to let that happen. Not on her watch. The following morning, as Whoopi arrived at the courthouse, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The media gathered in front of the building, cameras flashing as they waited for her to make her appearance. She stepped out. Of the car, her head held high, and faced the throngs of reporters. One shouted, "Whoopi, how do you feel going into the trial?" She paused, looked into the camera, and replied with a confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm ready. This is bigger than me. This is about all of us." As the words left her mouth, Whoopi knew she was more than just a celebrity facing a lawsuit. She was a voice for everyone who had ever been silenced, and she was going to make sure that voice was heard. The days leading up to the trial were filled with tension. Whoopi spent hours with her legal team, rehearsing every possible scenario. The media coverage had only intensified, and the pressure was now unbearable. It wasn't just about winning or losing in court. It was about the battle for her freedom of speech, her voice, and her legacy. As she prepared to step into the courtroom for the first day of the trial, Whoopi couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Her reputation, her future, and everything she had worked for hung in the balance. Musk's legal team had made it clear that they were going to make this as ugly as possible. They wanted to break her, to make an example of her, and they wouldn't hold back. The courthouse was packed with reporters, photographers, and onlookers, all eager to see the outcome of the trial. The atmosphere felt charged with an electric sense of anticipation. Whoopi's heart raced as she walked through the heavy courthouse doors, flanked by her attorneys. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces before they fell on the one person she knew would be in the courtroom that day, Elon Musk. He sat at the front, his expression cold, his posture stiff. He was the embodiment of calm control, a sharp contrast to the storm of emotions Whoopi felt inside. Musk's team had already made a statement, claiming that Whoopi's words had defamed him and caused substantial damage to his reputation and his business empire. The lawsuit had ballooned from a simple defamation case into a multi-million-dollar fight for public perception. The courtroom was where the fate of their reputations and their futures would be decided. The trial began with opening statements. Musk's lawyer spoke first, outlining the severity of Whoopi's joke and the damage it had done to Musk's public image. Ms. Goldberg's careless words were not just a matter of a poorly timed joke. They were an attack on a powerful individual, meant to harm his credibility and reputation. She used her platform irresponsibly, and now she must be held accountable for the damage she has caused. Whoopi sat motionless as the lawyer's words echoed in the room. She knew what was coming, every word, every accusation, every effort to paint her as the villain. But she wasn't going to let it break her. Not this time. When it was Whoopi's turn to speak, she rose from her seat. The room fell silent as she walked to the witness stand. She took a deep breath, her nerves steadying as she spoke directly. To the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I've been a public figure for many years. And in all that time, I've used my voice to entertain, to educate, and to speak out when something isn't right. But today, I stand before you not just as a comedian or a talk show host. I stand before you as a person who was wrongfully attacked for doing nothing more than making a joke." She paused, looking around the room, allowing the gravity of her words to settle in. "I never intended to harm Mr. Musk. I've never harbored any ill will toward him. But what I've learned in this process is that power isn't just about money or fame. It's about using your influence to silence others. And that's what's happening here. This lawsuit is not about right or wrong. It's about using the courts to bully and intimidate those who don't have the resources to fight back. And I refuse to be bullied." The room was still. And for a moment it felt like time stood still. Whoopi's words hung in the air like a challenge. She wasn't just defending herself. She was challenging the very foundation of the lawsuit, daring Musk's team to prove that a simple joke had caused irreparable harm. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The courtroom was filled with the back and forth of legal arguments, the presentation of evidence, and the mounting tension that seemed to grow with every passing minute. Musk's team continued to press their case, showing how the joke had damaged his brand, while Whoopi's team fought back, emphasizing her right to free speech and the absurdity of the lawsuit. In the evening, Whoopi returned to her apartment, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a sense that Musk's team was hiding something. There were too many unanswered questions, too many inconsistencies in their arguments. But it was also complicated. Every move they made seemed calculated to wear her down. She sat alone in her living room, staring at the city below, and for the first time in days, she let herself feel the weight of the situation. The pressure had been immense, but she knew she had no choice but to keep going. Suddenly her phone buzzed. It was Ava, her lead attorney. "We've got a breakthrough," Ava said, her voice urgent but controlled. "We've uncovered something that could change everything. We need to meet first thing tomorrow morning to discuss." Whoopi's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the turning point she'd been waiting for? Could there really be a way out of this nightmare? She didn't know what the next day would bring, but she did know one thing: she wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when she was so close to exposing the truth. The next morning, Whoopi met with Ava and her legal team, who presented the evidence they had uncovered, a piece of information that could potentially unravel Musk's entire case. It was a small detail buried in the paperwork, but it was enough to raise doubts about the legitimacy of Musk's claims. "Do you think this will be enough to sway the jury?" Whoopi asked, feeling a flicker of hope. Ava nodded. "This could be the opening we need. If we can prove that Musk's team fabricated or exaggerated key parts of their case, we can turn this whole trial around." Whoopi took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. This wasn't over yet. The fight was still on and she wasn't backing down. The stakes had never been higher. Whoopi could feel the weight of everything she had worked for pressing down on her as the trial entered its final phase. Her legal team had unearthed a critical piece of evidence that could expose the flaws in Musk's case. But now it was a race against time to present it in front of the jury without giving Musk's team the chance to counteract it. The trial had been long and grueling, with each side presenting its arguments in exhaustive detail. The media circus had only grown, as the eyes of the world were now fixed on the courtroom, waiting for the final resolution of what had become a landmark case. Whoopi wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She had become a symbol of resilience, of standing up against those who used their power to intimidate others. She had seen firsthand how the case had captivated people, how her own struggles had become intertwined with the hopes of so many who felt powerless against the wealthy and powerful. And now, with this crucial new evidence, she had a chance to change everything. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the final day of the trial began. Reporters crowded the halls, their cameras trained on the courthouse doors, ready to capture every moment. Whoopi sat in the defendant's chair, her hands clasped together tightly, her mind focused. Ava, her lead attorney, stood beside her, whispering final instructions as they prepared for the moment of truth. "We're going to present this evidence. Carefully," she said. "It's our best shot at dismantling Musk's case, but we need to be methodical. Make sure you stay calm and collected, no matter what they throw at you." Whoopi nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She had come so far, and now it all came down to this. The proceedings began with Musk's team delivering their closing arguments. They emphasized once more the damage Whoopi's words had done to Musk's reputation, portraying him as a victim who had been unfairly targeted. They claimed that the fallout from the joke had affected his business dealings, his public image, and even his personal life. The room was filled with their usual bombastic rhetoric, painting Musk as an innocent man caught in the crossfire of an entertainer's careless joke. Then it was Whoopi's turn. She rose slowly from her seat and walked to the podium. The room seemed to hold its breath as she began her closing statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not just about a joke. It's not about me or Elon Musk. It's about the freedom we all share to express our opinions, to speak out, and to stand up for what we believe in. As a comedian, I've always made jokes about the world around me, including about people in the public eye. And yes, sometimes those jokes miss the mark. But that doesn't mean I should be silenced. I don't believe anyone, regardless of how rich or powerful they are, should be able to use the courts to punish someone for speaking their truth. This lawsuit is not about me. It's about a larger issue. It's about ensuring that none of us are ever afraid to speak our minds, no matter how uncomfortable the conversation may be." The room was silent as Whoopi's words hung in the air. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "But the truth is this. We've uncovered something very important, something that casts doubt on the legitimacy of this entire case. Musk's team has made claims about the harm my words have caused, but the evidence they've presented simply doesn't add up. And the information we've found proves that they've exaggerated, distorted, and even fabricated certain details in order to strengthen their argument." A collective murmur ran through the courtroom. Whoopi's legal team had presented new documents, internal communications from Musk's team, that seemed to show they had intentionally inflated the damage caused by Whoopi's joke. They had manipulated evidence, selectively chosen examples, and pushed a narrative that wasn't entirely truthful. These revelations had the potential to unravel Musk's entire case, and Whoopi knew that she had just shifted the balance of power in the room. "Make no mistake," Whoopi continued, her voice steady and strong, "I stand before you today not as a defendant, but as a person who refuses to be intimidated into silence. We cannot let this kind of abuse of power go unchecked. If Musk's team can manipulate the facts in this courtroom, what's to stop them from doing it again in the future?" The room was still as the jury took in Whoopi's words. For a moment, Whoopi felt the full weight of the trial. This wasn't just about one person's reputation anymore. It was about the integrity of the justice system itself. With one final glance around the courtroom, she sat back down. The jury would deliberate, and the waiting began. Whoopi had made her case, and now all she could do was hope that the truth would prevail. The deliberation lasted hours, the tension in the air palpable. Whoopi sat in the courtroom, her palms sweating, her mind racing with the possibilities of what the jury might decide. Would they see the truth in her defense, or would the powerful forces aligned against her prove too strong? Finally, the door to the jury room opened. The jury foreperson stepped into the courtroom, holding the piece of paper that would determine the outcome of the case. The room fell silent as everyone stood, waiting for the verdict. "Will the defendant please rise?" the judge asked. Whoopi stood, her knees weak but her head held high. She felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her, the weight of the moment pressing down. The jury foreperson cleared their throat. "We, the jury, find in favor of the defendant, Whoopi Goldberg." Whoopi's heart skipped a beat as the words registered. She had won. The truth had won. Musk's case had crumbled under the weight of its own lies and manipulation. The room erupted into murmurs, and Whoopi could hardly believe it. She had fought the good fight, and in the end, justice had prevailed. As she left the courtroom, surrounded by her team, her friends and supporters, Whoopi felt a surge of relief and pride. She hadn't just won a legal battle. She had fought for her voice, for her right to speak her truth and for the truth itself. The media would spin their narratives, and Musk would likely fight back in the future. But Whoopi knew that today. She had made a stand that would echo far beyond the courtroom. She wasn't just Whoopi Goldberg, the comedian or the talk show host anymore. She was a fighter, a symbol of strength and resilience, and she had just proven to the world that no one, no matter how powerful, could silence her. The days following the trial were a whirlwind. News outlets across the world reported the verdict, with headlines varying from "Whoopi Goldberg wins defamation lawsuit against Elon Musk" to "David defeats Goliath, Whoopi's triumph over Musk." Her legal team, her friends, and her supporters rallied around her, congratulating her on the monumental win. It wasn't just a victory in court. It was a victory for anyone who had ever felt silenced by those in power. But even as the world celebrated, Whoopi was trying to process what had just happened. The emotions were overwhelming. She had fought not just for herself, but for a cause much greater, an issue of free speech, the right to speak truth to power, and the consequences of using one's influence to intimidate. Sitting in her apartment, staring out at the New York City skyline, Whoopi reflected on how far she had come. The path hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments of fear, and plenty of sleepless nights. But she had stood firm in her belief that what she was doing was right. It was something that she knew deep down could change things for others. For so many, her trial had become a symbol of resistance. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Joy, her longtime friend and co-host. "Whoops, I just wanted to say, you did it. We all knew you would, but still, I can't believe it." Joy's voice crackled through the phone. "I know," Whoopi chuckled softly, the weight of it all still settling in. "It feels surreal, like I'm still trying to take it all in." "Well, take your time. You earned this. You've been through a lot. But now it's time to breathe, time to think about what comes next." Whoopi nodded, even though Joy couldn't see her. "Yeah, I'm definitely going to take a break for a bit, but I also feel like this is just the beginning. There's so much more that needs to be done." "You've sparked a fire, Whoopi. It's a fire that's going to grow, people will listen. And your voice, it matters more than ever." The conversation was a reminder that while the trial had ended, the journey was far from over. Whoopi knew that the fight for truth and justice wasn't confined to the courtroom. It was something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As the weeks passed, Whoopi made a conscious effort to step back from the media spotlight. The constant chatter, the cameras, and the reporters who had followed her every move began to fade, though her name continued to be a trending topic for weeks. She used the time to reflect, to plan her next steps, and to reconnect with her friends, family, and colleagues. One day, as she was having lunch with Ava, her lead attorney, Whoopi leaned back in her chair and asked, "Ava, do you ever wonder if any of this would have happened if I hadn't said anything? If I'd just stayed silent?" Ava looked at her, her expression thoughtful. "Whoopi, I think we both know the answer to that. If you had stayed silent, someone else would have taken your place. But it was you who stood up, and that made all the difference." Whoopi nodded, understanding the weight of those words. She wasn't just defending herself, she was standing up for those who didn't have the platform to do so. And in the process, she had made it clear that her voice was not for sale, nor was it to be intimidated. Months later, Whoopi decided to step back into the public eye, not through interviews or press conferences, but through a new project. She announced she would be creating a documentary series about the intersection of free speech, power, and justice. It was a natural next step for her, a way to continue the conversation and bring awareness to the issues that had consumed her life over the past year. The documentary would feature interviews with activists, lawyers, and individuals who had faced similar struggles. those who had fought for their voices to be heard in a world that often sought to silence them. Whoopi wanted to highlight the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. In one of the opening scenes of the documentary, Whoopi herself appeared on screen, addressing the audience. "I know firsthand what it's like to feel powerless, to feel like the odds are stacked against you. But I also know that silence is not the answer. If we want change, we have to speak up, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. And if we have the power to fight, we must, because the truth has a way of coming to the surface, and when it does, it can change everything." The documentary was released to critical acclaim, sparking a new wave of conversation about free speech, the abuse of power, and the importance of holding the powerful accountable. Whoopi's story had resonated with millions, and the impact of her journey reached beyond the legal victory. She had inspired a movement, one that was built on courage, integrity, and the determination to make a difference. As the years went by, Whoopi continued her career, but her role as an advocate for free speech and justice had become just as important as her work in entertainment. She became a powerful voice in various social and political movements, using her platform to amplify the voices of others who had been silenced by the powerful forces that sought to control them. But perhaps the most rewarding part of all of this was the messages she received from fans, from people who had been following her story. There were messages from people who had fought their own battles with injustice and had found strength in Whoopi's journey. They had watched her fight and had seen themselves in her, their own struggles reflected in her triumph. One letter stood out to Whoopi. It was from a young woman who had been struggling with the fear of speaking out against an abusive work environment. "I watched you during the trial, and it gave me the strength to finally stand up for myself," the letter read. "You showed me that my voice matters. Thank you for being brave. You changed my life." Tears welled up in Whoopi's eyes as she read the letter. In that moment, she knew that the battle she had fought, the battle she would continue to fight, had been worth it. It wasn't about the win in the courtroom. It wasn't about the fame or the media attention. It was about the lives she had touched, the change she had sparked, and the legacy she was leaving behind. And that was more than enough. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough?